It turns out that we're going to go out to the corridor again. My alarm goes off, we go out into the corridor, we gather up by the stairs. Usually get direction. You don't feel comfortable, obviously, using the stairs. But it turns out that there's a lot of NYMTC staff here, just follow the process. Make sure we get you out of here. Any questions before we start? Okay, Jack, are we ready? Okay, and we are recording, correct? Okay, good afternoon. My name is Chris Hardy, and I am the Staff Director of the New York City Transportation Coordinating Committee. This is the fifth of 6 meetings that are being offered at 3 different locations. Turns out that it is being offered in the middle of a 30-day comment period on the proposed 2020 to 2024 TIP, which is the Transportation Improvement Program. I'll be using TIP throughout the presentation. And the Transportation Conformity Determination. Our objective is to collect public commentary, which will receive formal responses and be included in the final documents submitted to Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration. We will be recording your commentary for this purpose. Now, after I get done with the opening remarks, I'll provide you some contextual information on the TIP and transportation conformity, such that everyone understands the significance in the funding transportation improvements. Then we'll open the floor for comments at the end. For those on the webinar, all lines are muted, and comments will be collected via the webinar chat card and read into the record during the meeting. Our purpose at the meeting is to collect commentary for our members to review and respond to. Therefore, should questions be asked, we may be able to answer them, but even if we not get a chance to answer them, what we do is we'll record the formal responses into the document. So moving on to the presentation, I first want to make sure everyone knows who is NYMTC, or what is NYMTC. NYMTC is the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. It is the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the downstate New York area. We are a regional council of governments, and I'll talk about the membership shortly. We are an organization that is required by federal legislation, which authorizes the funding for transportation improvements. And this organization is responsible for the mandated metropolitan transportation planning process. Now, I did talk about the downstate New York area. NYMTC planning area is the 10-county region, as noted on the map here. You can see that it goes from Putnam, Rockland, all the way down through New York City out to the tip of Long Island. Now, this is home to about 12 million people. And to be more responsive, since the areas are different and have different needs, we do have transportation coordinating committees. We have Mid-Hudson South to the north, which is Putnam, Rockland, and Westchester. They had the same meetings on Tuesday. And then out to the east with Nassau Suffolk there, Nassau Suffolk TCC had their meeting yesterday. And today we're going to wrap it up with 2 meetings here for the 5 boroughs of New York, in the New York City TCC. Now, in terms of the membership, we do have the county executives being 5 of the 9 voting members. We also, for New York City, have 2 voting members of the New York City Department of City Planning and the commissioner over at the New York City Department of Transportation. We also have 2 voting members from agencies that go across the whole NYMTC area in terms of New York State Department of Transportation and the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, MTA. We also have advisory members, and they are non-voting members, and those would be from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, New Jersey Transit, and our sister MPO across the river in terms of North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. We also have the Air Quality Agency from New York in terms of Department of Environmental Conservation, and the three federal agencies of the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, and US EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. Now, as I mentioned, we're responsible for the Metropolitan Transportation Planning process, and this is affectionately known as the planning wheel, is what I tend to call it. It all starts with the Regional Transportation Plan, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner. That is our long-range document, usually more than 20-year horizon. Our current plan is Plan 2045. It defines the long-range needs. The next document that we're required to have is the Unified Plan and Work Program, and that tends to be the identifies improvements. It's typically a one-year program, and that would include studies. And then the next item there, as you can see, again, the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. And that's why we're here today. We have this new draft TIP, which is under public review. It defines the schedule and funding. The bottom line is that if your project needs funding in terms of federal funding, it has to be on the TIP, which enables it to receive federal funds. Then the next two items that we required to, mandated to do is congestion management process and the regional emissions analysis. And the regional emissions analysis is also the other document that is under public review as well. And Jerry Bogas will talk more about that document later. And then once we have all that done, we can end up going into project implementation. And of course, it doesn't stop there. This is a wheel, so we can just go back and do it around again. Through all of the TIP in the planning process, the TIP is a multi-year, multimodal program of transportation improvement projects, which comes from our plan. And the TIP is a 5-year program organized by federal fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts October 1st. And that pretty much drives the schedule. And since it is our capital program, you can expect to see the types of projects that are listed on the bottom of the slide here. But that's not totally inclusive because we also have other projects such as some freight projects as well as alternative fuel type projects. Now, for the TIP development cycle, the TIP is usually developed every 2 to 3 years. And it turns out that our TIP is actually part of the larger state TIP, otherwise known as the STIP. So we need to coordinate with the state so that we can be part of the larger document. But it turns out that during each cycle, what we do is we take the projects that are on the current TIP that didn't progress, we update them such that we can put it into the new TIP, and then there's a couple new years, which what we need to do is then add additional projects to fill out the new years of the new TIP. That's what I like about this slide because it shows it nicely where the current TIP is from 2017 to 2021. But we're just getting toward the end of the 3rd year of the current document. It's time to update that document. So when we created the new TIP, what we do is we look at the projects that have not progressed, typically those in 2020 and 2021, update them for the new TIP, and then we add 3 new years to the end of the projects that we have to come up with a new 5-year program. And those projects, of course, would come from the plan. Now, here's the federal funding programs that you would see in the current legislation that is administered by Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration. Again, if your project is going to be using these federal funds, you need to be on the TIP. The TIP will enable your project to receive funds. And it turns out for more explanation of these particular fund sources, you could go to the appendices of the TIP, which does have a section on the federal fund sources. Now, funding assumptions for the post-TIP, everything's about the plan and targets when you produce the TIP. You assume funding levels. And it turns out that current federal funding authorization for the FAST Act only goes for 1 more year as it ends in September of 2020. Well, we have 4 more years after that to project. So what we end up doing is typically we would assume a similar levels of funding to continue. And actually, funding goes to the state. So New York State DOT uses these assumed funding levels to develop planning targets for each of the administrative regions. Now, what's the administrative regions? Well, State DOT has 11 regions throughout New York. And as you can see here in New York City TCC, being down in the city, we correspond nicely with Region 11, covering New York City. Out on Long Island, the NASA Suffolk TCC fits within Region 10, and Mid-Hudson is in part of Region 8. And once we do have those planning targets, we have the members then build a program within those funding levels. We cannot program more than what we have funds for, and that's known as fiscal constraint, which is a requirement for the TIP as well. Now, in terms of this TIP, it is a $23.3 billion program across NYMTC. And if you look at the New York City area, it's $16.3 billion, which is approximately 70% of the TIP. And New York City in particular has 380 projects within the TIP. If you look at the breakdown, this TIP is actually 50-50 in terms of federal funding versus state and local funding. Now, of course, I mentioned 380 projects, but what I want to do is just quickly highlight some of the projects that you would expect to see in there, because that's a rather large list for you to look at. But it turns out that for City Department of Transportation, they have some regular programs that they fund annually, such as bicycle network development, pedestrian network development, otherwise known as PEDNet, clean vehicles, which is our alternative fuel type projects, traffic management center that they fund annually, as well as Staten Island Ferry Division has several projects. You also have their bridge programs. Besides the big East River bridges, there are also bridges within the boroughs. And some of them noted in this tip are the Shore Road over the Hutchinson in the Bronx, Hempstead Avenue over Cross Island Parkway, which is in Queens, Sealy Street, which happens to be over Prospect Avenue in Brooklyn. And then we have the Metropolitan Avenue over at CSX line, that's in Queens. We also have King Street, which is over the BQE. Again, that's just a few of the bridges that you would see. For their safety program, they have projects such as Safe Routes to School, Atlantic Avenue in Delancey, but those are particularly for safety funding. They do have other safety projects that do contribute to their initiative of Vision Zero. Particularly like pedestrian network development also contributes to that initiative. And even the next one, Queens Boulevard. Queens Boulevard has 4 phases that is listed in the TIP. That happens to be part of the Great Streets program. Also on the TIP, which is a carryover from the current TIP, is the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway Triple Cantilever. And the city also has several select bus service projects. Moving to our next member, here within the New York City TCC is the New York State Department of Transportation. They have some regular programs that they fund annually as well. And they tend to be the annual maintenance contracts on various highways and parkways throughout the city. And those tend to be crack sealing, bridge painting, bridge repairs, as well as sweeping on their facilities. And they also fund the Joint Transportation Management Center in terms of operational support every year. Other types of projects, mobility improvements and active transportation and demand management on various highways, particularly Long Island Expressway, Cross Bronx, Gowanus, and the Bruckner. They have safety improvements on the various highways and parkways citywide, as well as bridge and pavement preservation projects and the facilities that you see listed there. And also you'll see within this program some major capital projects such as the Van Wyck Expressway access to JFK Airport, which has 3 phases. Hunts Point access is another 3 phases, and Cross Bronx Expressway corridor. Moving to the MTA, Metropolitan Transportation Authority. The previous program the current TIP, reflects the priorities of the 2015 to 2019 capital program. We're currently in the last year of their program, and the 2020 to 2024 program is currently under development. So those projects are not part of this TIP yet. They will be amended in once approved. But it turns out that the New York City, you would expect to see projects such as what's on the TIP now in terms of New York City Transit, spending funds on normal replacement of rolling stock tracks and switches. They have investment in other projects such as signals, infrastructure, and stations, as well as Second Avenue Subway. They also have Staten Island Railway in terms of investing in rail cars and power systems. And then we have MTA Bus. Pretty much their listings have their investments toward vehicle replacement and their depots. And like I mentioned, there's a lot of projects, but we do have a tool to help you zone in on a particular area. And for this, I would like to pass off to David Ritz from the, you're going to go over to the other computer? Okay. And David Ritz will give a demonstration on the visualization.
Okay, I guess we'll get up. So we have the, first of all, I'm David Ritz, and I'm going to be providing an overview of the TIP visualization that we've put together working with our members. The visualization was created in ArcGIS Online, flexible platform that we use to collect data and pull it together, and it's one that we have for use for the for public consumption. So, without further ado, to actually view your projects, there are two different ways that you can access the geodata. You can either zoom in by clicking on the plus, minus signs, or you can actually do a keyword search. So in this case, I'll do a keyword search, and you can search either by address, place, neighborhood even. So for New York, that's pretty handy. You can actually go into, say, Forest Hills. Queens, there we go. So, it automatically takes you to the location and identifies all the different projects that are in the area. I'm going to actually turn off some layers to make it a little cleaner to be able to see. So we have both plan data, sociodemographic data, congressional district information. So if there are any folks who are either from the a congressional LA or a representative of the Senate or Assembly, you can access which projects are in your area. We have the district maps that provide that information. So let me just shut those down, make it a little bit cleaner. All right, so right now I've pulled up a bunch of projects that are in Forest Hills, right? So we have a legend which identifies the type of projects, and I believe the iconography got a little bit changed from where it should be. Nevertheless, so we have 4 points. We have highway, transit, pedestrian, ferry, bus, bike, ITS, and parking. Those are the different types of projects that we're providing information on. As for lines, they represent corridor work that is being done, be it in bike, head, ITS, or transit, and bus service. So, say we wanted to select a actual project pin. So, when you select a particular layer, it will provide you an overview of that information. So it will provide you with the plan ID for the project. It will provide you with a PIN number for that project, which is the number that we use to identify projects in the TIP. project listing, excuse me. We also have the coordinating committee that is responsible, so in this case the New York City Transportation Coordinating Committee, the county that it's in, project name, its description, and the total TIP project cost, or total project cost actually, that's identified in the TIP. The agency that's responsible for it, as well as the air quality codes that we use to identify projects, whether projects that are exempt or not exempt, the regional emissions analysis that is required in NYMTC since we are in a non-payment area. Lastly, we have, which project you're looking at, so this is the TIP 2020, 2024. We have a similar visualization out for the 2017-2021, so many of the information that you see here actually applies to what is currently on our website for the TIP that is currently adopted. Now, let's see. So if you pull up additional information on a particular project that goes into the phases of work and that shows basically what is in the project listing, we have the phase data, and by selecting, so in this case, I'll do it again so folks can actually see it. I may have done it a little quickly. So say if I select this, if you select the show related records, it will pull up all the related records that are associated with this project. So we have the phase PIN and the PIN number, basically the estimated obligation date when the project is assumed to be obligated, the federal fiscal year that it's obligated. Chris mentioned the time period where the obligation begins after October. The phase of work, the phase description, the fund type, the fund type. So in this case, it would be a highway safety improvement program project, the federal aid cost, the non-federal aid cost. So those are the general pieces of information that are associated with this project. Other projects have more phases of work. This one just had a construction phase. But in a nutshell, what is important to understand is that while this is a visualization of all projects that are geo-referenceable and geocodable, it is not the entire NYMTC project listing. For that information, you need to go to the NYMTC.org website that Chris is going to provide the link for, and that's where the total listing of projects is available. So that is where you need to go to get it all. But for project information that is in your local area, this is a very effective tool to be able to identify your project. It's also, you can use this on a tablet or an iPhone or an Android phone, so you're not limited to a particular platform. So that's pretty much it. And with that, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Chris. Let's see if we can get back into the slide share. Yeah.
Thank you, David. And as David just mentioned, you can find all the documents, the TIP documents on the TIP, along with the visualization tool. We have many requirements for the TIP. Transportation performance management is one of the latest requirements that we have. If you go to the plan and reg, the TIP shall include, to the maximum extent practical, a description of the anticipated effects of the TIP toward achieving performance targets. NYMTC has established and is using a performance-based approach to transportation decision-making to support national goals for transportation performance. The anticipated effects of the TIP towards achieving statewide performance targets are described in the proposed TIP. And the TIP up front does have a narrative, and that's where you would find this particular requirement. Moving on to the schedule, we're actually getting toward the end of the TIP schedule. It's been a long schedule, and the first point here is where we are currently in terms of we started the comment period on the 24th. It is going to end July 23rd. and that's on the TIP as well as the Transportation Conformity Determination. After we get done with this comment period on the 23rd, we will need to respond to comment. And then the next event will be on the week of August 19th. Each of the 3 TCC areas will hold their executive meetings to recommend the project list to PFAC. Now, PFAC, which is the Program Finance Administration Committee, a week later on August 27th, will then recommend the TIP for council adoption. And then the council will act on September 5th to adopt the TIP and the conformity determination. And if you notice, that's the beginning of September, just before October 1st. That gives the federal agencies time to review the document. And come October 1st, that's the beginning of the new federal fiscal year. Hopefully we'll have both documents in place. And with that, in terms of the second document under review, I would like to hand it off to Jerry Bogaz, our Director of Planning here at NYMTC.
Hi, folks. So what I'd like to do is quickly go through the other product that's under public review right now, which is the Transportation Conformity Determination for the new TIP and also the existing plan. So what is that? So Transportation Conformity, here we go, is a requirement of the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990, which set national clean air standards. And the determination of conformity, every time we adopt a TIP or plan or amend those documents, is required for continuing eligibility for federal transportation funding in non-attainment areas. Those are areas that do not meet the specific clean air standards specified in by the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990. So this process really connects air quality planning with transportation planning. But the focus of our particular analysis is on mobile source emissions from cars, trucks, motorcycles, and transit, as opposed to area-wide sources and point sources or site sources. Those are covered through other analyses by the state. So what does the conformity determination involve? As you can see, we're forecasting mobile source emissions for the plan and the Transportation Improvement Program, and we're comparing those forecasts to emissions budgets that are set by the State Implementation Plan for Air Quality. So what the determination does is establish that emissions budgets will not be exceeded in the future by whatever program or plan NYMTC has in place. That is essentially what the determination is. The State Implementation Plan for Air Quality is called the SIP, and it responds to the non-attainment areas identified by the Clean Air Act amendments in New York State and the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS, that are set by the Clean Air Act, and basically forecasts attainment of these air quality standards by certain target years specified in the law. The State Implementation Plan addresses pollutant sources and types and establishes emissions budgets. The emissions budget that applies to our process here is mobile source emissions budget. And the pollutants to be addressed, again, these are specified in the Clean Air Act amendments, are ground level ozone, carbon monoxide, and particulate matter. So what our regional emissions analysis does is looks at, for ground level ozone, two components that are precursors. VOC is volatile organic compounds. NOx is nitrogen oxide. These are precursors for ground level ozone. You can see there's a non-attainment area that includes all counties except Putnam County, and then Putnam County is actually part of the Poughkeepsie non-attainment area, which includes counties to our north. For carbon monoxide, that non-attainment area involves the 5 New York City boroughs, Westchester and Nassau counties. For coarse particulate matter, which is particulate matter of 10 microns or above, that's Manhattan, New York County. And then finally, for fine particulate matter, which is 2.5 to 10 microns, that's all counties except Putnam plus Orange County to the north. So these are the relevant pollutants and non-attainment areas that are specified that affect NYMTC's planning area. So this map, which you can't really see too well here, shows some of those overlapping areas, and then goes through on the right the various non-attainment areas You can see some of them are under a maintenance plan, which means that the air quality standard has been achieved, and now the test is to maintain it over time. Whereas others, like ground level ozone, we're still in non-attainment, and that status changes over time also. Now, the results of the regional emissions analysis, first of all, this is all documented on the website. There's a lot of analysis that goes into this, a lot of assumptions and modeling work. All that is documented, and it is available on the website on the same page as the draft TIP. So I'm just going to be showing you a couple of graphs that summarize the results, but there's a lot of information that backs up these results. So the first budget test is 9 county NOx multiple source emissions analysis in tons per day. The second is 9 county VOC multiple source emissions analysis in tons per day. The third is annual fine particulate matter multiple source emissions for 9 NYMTC counties plus Orange County. This is excluding Putnam County. And then finally, annual NOx multiple source emissions for 9 counties plus Orange County, excluding Putnam County, in tons per year. So these last two are tons per year. The first two were tons per day. And we demonstrate in the conformity determination that based on our analysis and our forecasting of both travel and vehicle emissions, multiple source emissions, that we will not exceed these standards in the new TIP, in addition to the plan that's in place right now. So at this point, we are at the end of the contextual part of the program, which will give you some overview of what these things are. Our comment submission is through 4 p.m. on July 23rd. These meetings are, in fact, collecting some of the commentary, but should you step out of this meeting and feel that you need to make a comment later in time, you have until 4 o'clock on the 23rd, and you can see that it can be mailed to us, it can be faxed, it can be emailed to us, any number of ways to get us the written comments, but it does have to be in writing. And as Chris said at the outset, we're required to address all public comments and questions and concerns in writing, in the documentation, and those responses are reviewed by the federal agencies to see if they concur with any changes that were made or any explanations that that are in response to the commentary that we receive. So, having said all that, I'd like to find out if there's first anyone in the room that has any comments, and then we'll go to the webinar. But the folks on the webinar, please, if you're going to submit a comment, please type it into the chat pod, and it'll be read in the room by either Jack or John back there, so that we can all hear what it is. So first of all, in the room, are there any specific comments or questions that anybody has? I don't think so. Okay. John, any coming in off the webinar?
Not at the moment.
Okay. So keep the webinar open. We'll keep it open for the next, say, 10 or 15 minutes, just in case any of the people on the webinar, there's several parties on the webinar, wants to submit anything in the chat pod. But again, the comment period is open through July 23rd at 4 o'clock. We are doing this again tonight at 6:30, so there's one last opportunity. We will take all the commentary that's been collected, organize it, and speak with our members, consult with our members in terms of how to respond to it, and we will get that documentation ready to be included in the overall documentation for both the TIP and for the conformity determination. So, Chris, with that, if you want to give the benediction, you can use it. You can.
Let's go to the last slide.
Go to the last slide.
With that, thank you all. We're just going to keep the lines open in case we have other comments. And if you like this so much, don't forget we'll be heading back at 6:30. Good to see you.
Yeah. No.